Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the ground beneath your feet is worth a fortune, that the land you're standing on is about to become the most contested, most desired, most transformative territory in the entire Western Hemisphere. And it begins long before any gold was ever found, long before any flags were planted, and long before anyone even called it California.
Today, California is home to nearly 40 million people and carries an economy so large it rivals entire nations. But what most people never stop to consider is that California wasn't always American. It wasn't always Mexican. And for thousands of years, it wasn't even a concept that existed in any European mind. So how did one piece of land go from ancient indigenous territory to Spanish colony to Mexican province to American state, all in just a few centuries? That's exactly what we're going to uncover today. Long before any European ship touched the California coastline, this land was alive with civilization. For roughly 13,000 years, hundreds of distinct Native American tribes called this region home. The Ohlone lived near the San Francisco Bay. The Chumash thrived along the southern coast. The Mojave settled the desert regions in the southeast. Altogether, California supported one of the densest indigenous populations anywhere in North America, with estimates suggesting somewhere between 300,000 and 700,000 people lived here before European contact. These communities were not primitive or disorganized. They were sophisticated societies with complex trade networks, rich spiritual traditions, and deep knowledge of the land they inhabited. The geography of California made this possible. Fertile valleys, abundant rivers, a mild coastal climate, and diverse ecosystems meant that communities could sustain themselves without large-scale agriculture. California was, in many ways, a paradise. And then the Spanish arrived. In 1542, a Portuguese explorer sailing under the Spanish crown, named Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, became the first European to navigate the California coast. He sailed north, mapped portions of the coastline, and claimed the land for Spain. But Spain did almost nothing with it for another 200 years. It wasn't until the mid-1700s that Spain began to take California seriously, and that urgency had everything to do with competition. Russia was expanding its presence along the Pacific coast from the north. Britain was growing more aggressive in its territorial ambitions. Spain needed to secure California or risk losing it to a rival power. Beginning in 1769, Spanish officials launched a systematic colonization effort led by a Franciscan friar named Junipero Serra. Over the following decades, 21 missions were established, stretching from San Diego in the south to Sonoma in the north. These missions were not simply religious outposts, they were engines of colonization. Alongside them came presidios, which were military forts, and pueblos, which were civilian settlements. The Spanish strategy was to convert native Californians to Christianity, incorporate them into colonial labor systems, and anchor Spanish territorial claims to permanent settlement. For the indigenous population, this period was catastrophic. Forced labor, disease, and cultural destruction reduced the native population dramatically. Entire ways of life that had persisted for thousands of years were dismantled within a single generation. Spain held California for decades, but its grip on its empire was weakening. Inspired by the American and French revolutions and exhausted by Spanish mismanagement, Mexico launched its own independence movement. In 1821, Mexico successfully broke free from Spain, and California, still sparsely populated and far from Mexico City, became Mexican territory almost by default. Mexican California looked different from Spanish California in meaningful ways. The mission system was gradually dismantled, and enormous land grants called ranchos were distributed to wealthy Mexican citizens. A cattle-based economy emerged. Cowhide and tallow became the primary exports, traded with American and European merchants who made the long voyage around South America to reach California's ports. This era had a certain romantic character to it, but it was also unstable. Mexican authority over California was always loose. The territory was remote, underfunded, and increasingly attracting American settlers who were moving westward with a sense of divine purpose. Americans in the 1840s had fully embraced the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that the United States was destined to stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific.
California was the prize at the end of that westward vision. Tensions between Mexico and the United States were already building over Texas when American settlers in California's Sacramento Valley decided not to wait for diplomacy. In June 1846, a group of American rebels seized the Mexican garrison at Sonoma and raised a handmade flag featuring a grizzly bear and a lone star. They declared the California Republic. The Bear Flag Republic lasted only 22 days before American military forces arrived, but it signaled something undeniable. California was slipping out of Mexican hands. The Mexican-American War, which had erupted in May 1846 along the Texas border, sealed California's fate. American forces under General Stephen Kearny marched overland, while naval forces secured coastal settlements. By January 1847, military resistance in California had effectively ended. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, signed in February 1848, formally ended the war and transferred California, along with a vast stretch of the Southwest, to the United States. Mexico received $15 million in compensation. And here is where history delivers one of its most stunning coincidences. Just 9 days before that treaty was signed, gold had already been discovered at Sutter's Mill. On January 24, 1848, a carpenter named James Marshall spotted something glittering in the American River at a sawmill owned by John Sutter, near present-day Coloma. Word spread slowly at first, and then with explosive speed. By 1849, people were flooding into California from every corner of the globe. From the eastern United States, from Mexico, from Chile, from China, from Australia, from France, and from Ireland, they all came chasing the same dream. California's population exploded from roughly 14,000 non-Indigenous people in 1848 to more than 100,000 just 2 years later. Boom towns erupted overnight. San Francisco transformed from a small settlement into a roaring city. The chaos was extraordinary. The fortunes made and lost were legendary, and the consequences for California were permanent. With such a massive and rapidly growing population, California could not remain a mere territory for long. In September 1850, as part of the Compromise of 1850, California was admitted to the Union as the 31st state. Remarkably, it skipped the territorial phase almost entirely. The speed of its statehood was directly tied to the gold rush population explosion. California simply grew too fast for the usual process to keep up. From there, the state continued to reinvent itself decade after decade. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, connected California to the rest of the nation. Agriculture flourished in the Central Valley. In the early 20th century, Hollywood emerged and made California the global capital of entertainment. After World War II, the aerospace industry transformed Southern California into a hub of innovation. And then came Silicon Valley, where the digital revolution was born, and California once again became the center of something the world had never seen before. California wasn't shaped by a single nation, a single people, or a single event. It was forged by native civilizations who understood this land for millennia, by Spanish missionaries who altered it forever, by Mexican ranchers who worked its soil, by American settlers who claimed it, by gold seekers who flooded it, by immigrants who built it, and by innovators who reimagined it. California is not just a state. It is the result of centuries of ambition, conflict, survival, and transformation. And that story is still being written.